Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for January 25th, 2018, continuing our discussion of Million Dollar Baby. Um, spoilers. I'm about to blow the twist in the film. Okay, so the movie is about, it concerns a female boxer named Maggie who harangues this man named Frankie, who's sort of like the best manager, coach for boxers in LA, I guess. And she's just utterly determined to work with him. Eventually, they work together, and she rises to the ranks on a combination of skill and heart, probably with heart predominating until she gets to the championship fight. And again, spoiler, and in the championship fight, she then proceeds to, because of an illegal blow by her opponent, break her neck and become paralyzed from the neck down. And so the third act is concerned with her medical treatment, and specifically, Maggie asks Frankie to euthanize her, though she doesn't use that word, and he does do so, and then the movie ends with him sort of broken down in a diner after he kills her. The ending comes across as ambiguous because it can be read as a murder, of course. And so the movie at the end of I don't like calling this a boxing movie. Because at the end it's not really about boxing, it's about the degree in which we have control over our fate in terms of life and death issues. So, look, here's the thing about boxing. Boxing, if both people did not consent to boxing, one of them is committing a crime. So you have that sort of great, so it's just this sort of extreme version that two adults can beat the hell out of each other. Made even more stronger because of the sort of sexist prohibition we have against women being violent. Juxtaposed basically on about the question about the right to die, where Maggie wants to die because she's a quadriplegic person. And so this is what I mean, that it sort of embeds a positive message and a sort of damaging message. So the reason why it can be read as something of a positive message is the film, I think, ultimately sort of takes pro right to die stance, because the way in which the antagonism in this film is portrayed, all the sort of big beats in the movie, which concerns the antagonism or people moving the plot along because of something negative happening, can all be sort of characterized as not people, like the issues of consent about what the people are agreeing to do come up repeatedly in the movie. So let me use a couple of quick examples. The main one being, when the injury occurs, it wasn't because of a legal blow. It was because the Blue Bear, who was the opponent, cheated and had a cheap shot after the bell rung, which obviously, if you're agreeing to a boxing match, you're agreeing to a certain set of rules, which is in violation of. You also have, in a way, the conflict between Maggie and her family over the house that she bought is specifically about Maggie didn't get her family's permission to buy them a house. She didn't ask. And then you also sort of have, in the end scene, where Maggie finally has enough of her family. It's specifically because not only are they trying to steal her money, but her mother forces a pen into her mouth And so it seemed to be all the antagonism is built around sort of antagonism or indignation around people violating just bodily autonomy. So, for example, the subplot involving Scrap and Danger, the guy who beats up Danger, he's a punk because he's violating bodily autonomy. And the thing is, Maggie's injury is treated as much more tragic than Scrap's eye being blind in one eye. But because the thing is, the way in which the Scrap's eye story is told, he utterly he consented to that. He didn't want to throw in the towel. So so all the sort of like through lines of the positives or negatives of this film, even things like Frankie holding back his first fighter, male fighter, he wasn't allowing the person to be, the fighter to use his body as he saw fit. He was overly protective, etc. So all the sort of ways in which the movie builds is the characters are fiercely, they're fiercely determined to express or punish what happens to their bodies. Up to the point of euthanasia being asked for and given by the two main characters. So that's what I mean. So, like, as a person who thinks bodily autonomy is really supreme, I really sort of like these messages, and I wish I do believe in the right to die, and that's not really my sort of issue with the film. This isn't a Catholic right to life thing. It's specifically how, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to cut this in the movie, the way in which Maggie's decision to be euthanized is portrayed is because there's the scene about halfway through, right before she's getting injured. She remembers how her father put down a dog named Axel because the Axel couldn't walk anymore. And then when she asks Frankie to end her life, she doesn't say it that way. She simply says, "Can you do for me what my daddy did for Axel, or dad did for Axel?" So here's the thing: that way of asking for or talking about euthanasia is utterly ableist. This notion that people with disabilities are wounded animals who deserve to be put down is like the most classic way in which eugenicists talked about people with disabilities. And the right to die, which I support, is presented in this absolutely horrific way of sort of equivocating Maggie's circumstances as being with like a wounded dog, which is utterly dehumanizing, and it's like that's basically straight up eugenics. Okay, so that's why I feel so conflicted about this film's message. But the other thing about this, and this is something about like a writing technique, or about how I was saying what sort of ways do we have to tolerate damaging ideas being present in films, is Maggie, the character, she doesn't have much formal education. It's somewhat implied she doesn't even have a high school diploma. She is in she comes from basically white trash, if I can be classist for a second. And so, like, her asking to die with this sort of dehumanizing metaphor of putting an animal to sleep, like, that's sort of the way in which a character like Maggie would understand the situation. So on one hand, it feels like this really horrible ableist message to me, while on the other, it feels like a very truthful way of this character understanding their own sort of bodily autonomy. And I don't know quite what to do with that. So like so it's not just the metaphor. There's also like there's a more less tragic movie where Maggie recovers from her injury, maybe go to college, which is somewhat hinted at in the script as a possibility. But I can sort of sympathize because of being a boxer, being an athlete, control of your body is so important to you that I don't necessarily see Maggie's decision as ableist per se if it was expressed in a different metaphor, or in a different sort of way. So the metaphor, it's so like, yeah, you could say she ends up hating her body and she's sort of alienating herself from her own sort of lived experience. But at the same time, like, I'm not sure if a human being who was so athletically inclined that reaching the peak of a professional sport wouldn't necessarily react this way. So, like, again, it feels really damaging and ableist to me, but it also feels sort of truthful. And add that I think it's a good representation of how bodily autonomy works, and I don't really know what to do with the message of this film, and the text of the film in this way. And I guess in some ways that makes it a better film, because it is sort of complex in that way. So one of the reasons why, like, it's a very hard film for me to process, because I really like it as a piece of art. The other time, it sort of has this really horrific thing that hits me sort of personally on a system of oppression. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I want to talk about the movie as a movie in the next section. Okay, see ya.